No matter which type of heroes you prefer to play, welcome to the channel. As I'm recording today's video, there are a whopping 53 different adult heroes printed in Flesh and Blood. Even if you played a different hero every single week, it would take you more than an entire year to rotate through the game's growing cast of heroes. With new characters being printed in sets and armory decks, not to mention the stowaways that slip through the cracks, narrowing down to a single hero can feel like an impossible task. With so many heroes in so little time, it can be hard to figure out which hero is right for you. Do you want to play an aggressive hero, or do you prefer more defensive characters? Maybe you like building up a board state, pulling off game-winning combos, or even disrupting your opponent. And don't forget about mid-range. If choosing a hero seems daunting, LSS has created a tool to help you choose your next Flesh and Blood hero. And in today's video, I'm going to break down the 3 features that define aggro, combo, control, and every hero in between. By the end of today's video, you'll learn how to tell whether a hero plays towards tempo or fatigue, accelerates or decelerates the game, and lastly, whether their cards get linear value or synergize for multiplicative value. These 3 dimensions can be combined to describe every single hero in Flesh and Blood, helping anyone choose their optimal character. Before we get into the main topic for today's video, I want to thank my channel members on YouTube and Patreon, Codex Journals, and viewers like you. Thank you. Thanks to my partnership with Codex Journals, I'm excited to be giving away a free Codex Journal to one of my viewers. It's one of the best ways to improve at Flesh and Blood, with match and draft pages to help you focus on the things that really matter when reviewing your games. For a chance to win, all you need to do is leave a comment below with your favorite hero and where you think they fall on each of the 3 dimensions. I'll be announcing the random winner on Blue Sky 1 week after the video releases. Even if you aren't chosen for the giveaway, you can still get 10% off your very own Codex Journal by visiting codexjournals.com/bios and using code BIOS at checkout. Thanks again to Codex Journals for sponsoring today's video. Without further ado, let's jump into the first dimension, tempo versus fatigue. This first dimension is all about your hero's macro strategy, either maximizing the tempo of their hand-to-hand plays, or playing towards the overall quality of their entire deck, also known as fatigue. While aggressive heroes tend to play towards hand quality or tempo, and defensive heroes tend to play towards deck quality or fatigue, mid-range heroes often play anywhere in between. Tempo is all about pushing your opponents behind while pulling yourself ahead. While I've talked a lot about tempo recently, tempo. It essentially means how you maximize each hand's value. Playing towards tempo means that you're playing hands to pressure your opponent. Aggressive heroes do this by converting hands offensively, trying to put less aggressive decks on the clock. Whether it's by sending breakpoints, dealing split damage, going wide, or dealing unblockable damage, once a hero is at 1 life, any damage dealt wins the game. Aggressive heroes have synergistic abilities that incentivize playing towards tempo offensively. For example, Slippy, Puffin, and Fang's abilities provide extra action points and value when playing to their hero's strengths. For example, Slippy is rewarded with Go Again when it plays stealth attacks, while Puffin gets to draw a card when she cranks twice per turn. Lastly, Fang is a true value engine once he gets full tempo, putting his opponents in the blender with free Obsidian Fire Vein swings that get extra damage and Go Again when empowered by draconic cards. When supported by equipment like Flick Knives, Teklo Foundry Heart, and Valiant Dynamo respectively, these heroes can press their advantage with additional damage, resources, defenses, and more. While tempo is focused on maximizing the value of individual hands, fatigue's goal is to win the overall value war. Fatigue heroes have inevitability through consistent value plays. Fatigue is all about building your deck with efficient, high-quality cards. Even though tempo excels during the early and mid-game, fatigue heroes are favored if they can survive until the late game. Rather than going wide, fatigue heroes prefer tall, efficient attacks. Fiandal's Fighting Spirit, Rally the Coast Guard, and Infused Titanium are flexible 3-for-7s with good defensive utility. When behind on life, Wounded Bull does the same damage as 2 Scar-for-a Scars, but it only takes 1 card out of deck instead of 2. Cards that block well are important to help fatigue survive the early game. Channel Lake Frigid, Warmonger's Diplomacy, Ripple Away, and Fearless Confrontation are a few examples of utility blue block 3s that can stop opponents from gaining too much tempo when played. Defensive equipment and cards like Crash and Bash, Sink Below, and Haunting Rendition help fatigue decks cover up breakpoints. And lastly, Life Gain can help fatigue heroes undo chip damage and keep them healthy enough to pivot and regain control of the game's tempo later on. Pitch outlets are another phenomenal tool for fatigue decks to try to extract the most value out of their decks. For instance, RKO's hero ability and Gauntlets of Tyrannical Rex help him turn extra resources into value without losing cards. Higher cost weapons also help them grind out value, especially after both decks get get weaker during second cycle. A Nothos, Decimator Great Axe, and Tecloplasma Pistol with induction chambers and plasma purifiers are great examples of weapons that play towards a fatigue plan. Fatigue heroes become favored once their deck has more remaining value than their opponent's deck. At this point, fatigue heroes look to pivot and put their opponents on the back foot. Finishers like Macho Grande, Barraging Beatdown, and Machinations of Dominion are especially pertinent blue block 3s that provide evasive damage to close out the game. Before moving on to the next dimension, I want to note that heroes can fall anywhere on the tempo fatigue axis. In fact, many mid-range heroes have abilities that can accrue value over longer games, but don't necessarily fall under pure fatigue. These heroes can pivot offensively or defensively depending on the matchup. Hatchet's Dory is a great example, pressuring opponents' life totals with synergistic hatchet damage while maximizing deck value with weapon swings, Valiant Dynamos, and a deck full of D-reacts and 3-blocks. Another hero who epitomizes mid-range is Florian. He utilizes powerful go-again attacks like Runerager's Swarm and Swarming Gloomveil, but he has a consistent late-game engine once his hero ability is active, pitching a blue for Grasp and swinging with Reaping Blade for 2 rune chance and 3 physical damage. My personal favorite example is Dash, Inventor Extraordinaire. When she was legal in Classic Constructed, she was phenomenal at adapting her playstyle around her opponents. She could play an amazing tempo game at wombat fast speeds with Teclo Pounders and Talishar, as well as Turtley Fatigue by blocking out and setting up pistol items. Now that we've talked about tempo versus fatigue, it's time to talk about our next dimension, whether your hero tries to accelerate or decelerate the game. Now, before you ask, but BIOS Update, didn't you just talk about this in your tempo video? My response is twofold. Firstly, I'm glad you learned something from that video. Great job, keep it up, proud of you. Secondly, this aspect is so critical to Flesh and Blood's design that heroes can't be designed without keeping this element in mind. For those of you who haven't seen that video yet, accelerating cards speed up a hero's game plan, helping them deal damage faster than their opponent can return. These often provide heroes with extra action points, card draw, resources, or power. Aurora, Acilio, Fang, and KO Armed and Dangerous have accelerating hero abilities that are great examples for each of these categories respectively. However, anything that shortens the game can be seen as accelerating in nature. On the flip side, decelerating cards either reduce the opponent's output or incentivize blocking to prevent devastating on-hit effects. These often either remove access to go again, force opponents to discard cards, or reduce the opponent's overall power. While there aren't as many heroes with decelerating abilities, Teklevasen, Huntsman, Toughnut, and the Ice heroes have abilities that slow down the game. Much like the tempo fatigue axis, heroes can fall anywhere along this dimension, and classes seem to be designed with heroes across the spectrum, with heroes embodying various mixtures of both acceleration and deceleration. Even ninjas, the proverbial go-again class, have heroes like Ira, who's happy to block with 2 cards and send a Kadachi into a buff disruptive attack like Command and Conquer, Erase Face, or Censor. The Runeblade class is another great example of this. They have heroes like Chain and Aurora, who thrive when accelerating the game, heroes like Vinset, who decelerate the game with Disruption, and heroes like Briar, who fall somewhere in between, creating embodiments of Lightning and Earth. For every Starvo, there's an Ultim. For every KO Armed and Dangerous, there's a Toughnut, or another 2 KOs. One of the things that makes Flesh and Blood so engaging is how nearly every card can either block to decelerate the game, or be played offensively to accelerate the game. With Auras of Suspense, even instants have the ability to block now. This modularity gives heroes flexibility when deciding to accelerate or decelerate certain matchups. Even Ira runs plenty of accelerating cards alongside her disruptive tools, with her armory deck including staples like Seek Vengeance, Bittering Thorns, and Vengeance Never Rests. Determining whether to use cards offensively or defensively is one of the most skill-testing parts of the game for newer players. With cards that seem to provide similar value on offense and defense like Ether Dart, Scrap Compactor, Razor's Edge, and Sharpened Steel, how do you know whether it's optimal to use them to attack or defend? Well, the answer comes down to macro strategy. If your opponent is better at the late game, it's probably best to utilize the card to accelerate the game and prevent them from getting to second cycle. Since Fang is more efficient than most heroes once he gets to 3 fealty tokens, many heroes pivot to pure offense, especially if they can't disrupt his board state of fealty tokens. On the other hand, if your deck is better second cycle, then it's in your best interest to decelerate the pace of the game and commit more cards to defense. Since Dash.io has a limited number of Symbiosis shots and has to boost cards in order to go wide, many heroes commit to fatigue strategies against her. While macro strategy is matchup dependent, heroes on the extreme ends tend to have more consistent macro strategies across the metagame. For instance, Syndra is almost always the beatdown, accelerating herself to victory. On the other hand, Arachne Huntsman's game plan almost always revolves around disrupting their opponent's pitch stack and banishing cards from hand, deck, and arsenal. However, all heroes need to adapt their macro strategy based on their opponent to maximize the chances of winning the game. Even on the extreme ends, improving as a player means recognizing when to decelerate the game as Syndra or accelerate the game as Huntsman. Now that we know how heroes accelerate or decelerate the game to play towards tempo or fatigue, the final dimension is how a hero's cards extract value. Most Flesh and Blood cards are linear in nature. This means that their value is static, even if combined with other cards. For instance, Red Wounding Blow is, at its base, always a 0-cost, 4-power attack that defends for 3. If we look at similar generic attacks like Critical Strike, Brutal Assault, and Raging Onslaught, we can see that these gain points in power for each additional resource cost on the card. If we look at the yellow and blue versions of these attacks, we can also see that each extra resource causes these attacks to lose a point of damage. In fact, most linear cards follow this pattern, gaining points in one area while sacrificing points in another. These changes are balanced around the fundamental building blocks of Flesh and Blood in the form of action points, resource points, intellect, life, power, defense, and other abilities. For example, Scar for a Scar is worse than Wounding Blow at blocking, but it gets go again when you're at lower life. On the other hand, Arcanic Crackle trades physical power for split arcane damage. Cut Through loses a point in both power and defense, but gets buffed and go again if a dagger has hit this combat chain. The same value trade-offs can be seen across all card types in the game, including attack reactions, defense reactions, block cards, and more. While linear cards are relatively straightforward, multiplicative cards break free from the soul shackles of Flesh and Blood's value system. When put together in the right sequence, multiplicative cards have a chance to break the game. In fact, most of the banned and restricted cards are multiplicative in nature, from Art of War to High Octane, from Count Your Blessings to Duskblade, which did nothing wrong by the way. Multiplicative cards can quickly get out of hand when played optimally. Card draw is especially powerful for multiplicative heroes, who often have ways to draw extra cards, pull specific combo pieces, or play cards from other zones. Heroes with especially powerful combos are often balanced with lower life totals or reduced defenses in order to minimize their ability to just block out until they draw their combo or engine. Despite these limitations, multiplicative value cards are so powerful that certain heroes build entire decks around these cards, giving rise to combo and board presence heroes. Combo heroes aim to set up 1 or 2 giant turns that deal more damage than opponents can possibly block out. Zen's aptly named combo cards get additional power when played in the right order. On top of that, they get even stronger with his hero ability, which lets him pitch an inner chi to tutor a combo card and create a Crouching Tiger in hand to synergize with it. Basilio's Volzar can amp for double-digit arcane damage when he runs cards like Gone in a Flash and Blast to Oblivion with Lightning Greaves, Aether Bindings of the Third Age, and a specialization, Flash of Brilliance. Between Max Nitro's Mechanoid, Lyeth's Triple Intimidate double-digit bully tactics, and Bolton's Luminas that go Boomina, every combo hero has ways to set up massive amounts of multiplicative damage, sometimes even on their opponent's turn. On the other hand, board presence heroes tend to be more defensive than combo ones. Instead of playing towards 1 or 2 big turns, they set up engines that extract recurring value the longer they're left around. This is especially powerful in a game like Flesh and Blood, where most cards go to the graveyard after they're played. Unlike Head Jab, which maxes out at either 3 points offensively or 2 points defensively, Kasai's Centauri Sellswords can attack for 3 value each turn they're kept alive, and they get another 2 points of value minimum whenever her opponent targets them. Teklevossen is another example who can get multiplicative value whenever he refreshes Steel Soul Evos after getting 5 block value from them, accruing even more value from his equipment after he transforms into the Mechapotent. The revered Guardian Pleiades can cycle her engine, attacking with Cries of Encore in order to play up on a pedestal from graveyard, over and over and over again. Board presence heroes have abilities that typically interact with their engines. For example, Gravy Bones raises his undead allies from the graveyard, Pleiades moves suspense counters between her auras, and Prism tutors Figments whenever a herald is put into her soul, helping her awaken her army of angel allies. Now that we've covered the 3 dimensions that make up decks in Flesh and Blood, we can combine them to create the different archetypes in the game. Pure aggro decks like Syndra are some of the most consistent decks in the game. They accelerate by playing towards tempo and are mostly linear in nature. When combined, these 3 components make aggro decks phenomenal early metagame picks. On the other hand, aggro combo decks like Dash.io trade linear cards for key multiplicative pieces. When combining Spark of Genius, Cerebellum Processor, and Maximum Velocity, she can set up some gigantic turns to try to get over pure fatigue decks. As a pure combo hero, Kano relies on the total quality of his potions on board and combo pieces on the top of his deck in order to blaze his way to victory. A setup hero like Pleiades slows down the game and utilizes her board state of suspense auras to recur her power cards. As a control hero, Marlin is more than capable of disrupting her opponent's hands with devastating on-hit effects. Her bow cannon gives her harpoons additional damage and evasion, while her hero ability lets her convert gold into goldfin harpoons for powerful late-game anti-fatigue strategies. Tempo heroes like Slippy are slightly faster, playing less towards fatigue and more towards tempo. Their disruption makes them favored into aggro heroes, but they can be susceptible to defensive fatigue decks. Mid-range heroes like Fang tend to accelerate the game with powerful linear cards and efficient late games that are nearly immune to fatigue. However, they can fall anywhere along the tempo fatigue axis. There aren't many toolbox decks in Flesh and Blood, but I would argue that Gravy Bones plays towards tempo, decelerates the game, and has many cards that provide multiplicative value. With Call to the Grave, he's able to summon the right allies from his toolbox at the right time, threatening multiplicative damage if not dealt with immediately. Simultaneously, cards like Loot the Hold, Conqueror of the High Seas, and Gold-Baited Hook slow down opponents and prevent them from effectively targeting his crew of allies that are already on the board. Lastly, all-rounder heroes are some of the most flexible heroes in the game, exhibiting traits across all three spectrums. Heroes like Florian pressure opponents with efficient attacks and good defenses. He can play the early, mid, and late game phenomenally well, while he often plays linearly, blocking out with 3 cards and converting his last blue into 5 value. He can also cast Germinate, followed by Ninth Blade of the Blood Oath, multiplying the value he's able to get from his dozens of rune chants generated by his specialization. In summary, we talked about each of the 3 dimensions, discussing how a hero plays towards tempo or fatigue, accelerates or decelerates the game, and lastly, whether their cards get linear value or synergize for multiplicative value. We've also seen how these aspects can be combined to describe Flesh and Blood's growing cast of aggro, aggro combo, setup, control, tempo, midrange, toolbox, and all-rounder characters. Even though these 3 dimensions can be combined to describe Flesh and Blood's current roster, I want to mention that LSS is constantly iterating on their game's design and creating new heroes that are redefining what's possible in this game. Because of this, the 10th secret super special awesome archetype is Miscellaneous, for heroes that play in unique ways, untethered from the 3 dimensions covered today. If you made it to this part of the video, let me know your favorite hero and where you think they align across the 3 dimensions for a chance to win a free Codex journal. Lastly, I want to give a huge thank you to Scribnibble, Lazeus, and Forge for their insights while working on my thesis for today's video. If you haven't already, please consider liking, subscribing, and potentially joining as a channel member in order to support the content I make. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll teach you in the next one.